What's going on, guys? It is I, once again, Coach Dominic, with my beautiful co host, Kiani Adams, and this is another episode of the No BS Fitness Prescription Podcast with the Unhinged Perspective. Today's guest, we have bodybuilding physique coach, prescript coach, Liz Brody. Welcome to the show today, and how are you first and foremost?
I'm doing very well, and it's also nice to meet you on camera. So, Kayani and I, we work together in a coach-client relationship, so I already know her very well. Um, Thank you for the introduction. I am Liz Brody. I always say, call me Coach Liz, and I am excited to be on this podcast today.
Awesome, awesome. So before we even dive into it, the first thing I just want to go back into is you both are coaches,
Yes.
right? You both are coaches, and you have a coach, Kiani?
Mm-hmm.
And Liz, do you have a coach?
Not at the moment, but I've had many really good mentors and coaches through the years, and I do still kind of like touch base with them, if you will. But I coach myself for bodybuilding.
Okay, okay. But the biggest premise that I wanted to say to the audience out there is that good coaches have coaches, and we will dive deeper into that. But first and foremost, Liz, tell us where you're from, a little bit about yourself, and how you got into the industry.
All right. So I am from New York and I am actually in New York right now with my parents for the Christmas holiday. But I do live in Miami full time. So my history is I grew up doing dance and gymnastics until I was like, middle school ish. And then you had to choose like, do you want to do gymnastics? Do you want to do dance? I was scared to do back handsprings and backflips and stuff. So I just kind of like dance was my thing. My mom, however, was a gym rat always my entire childhood. So she introduced me to lifting weights when I was in middle school. I was always a little bit heavier. And when you're always in a dance and gymnastics environment, you're made to feel like you are, you know, the other when you are not small and lean. So my mom wanted me to feel good about my body and like show me that I was strong. So she actually had me train with one of her good friends who was a bodybuilder. And just to like kind of like show me, okay, like, wow, you are kind of naturally strong, and just to boost my confidence a little bit. So I was actually introduced to like formal weight training when I was like 11 and 12 years old. But then in terms of when my actual fitness journey, if you will, started, that would be college. That was when I went to NYU and Crunch Gym was right across the street from my dorm. So I was like, well, I'm going to join Crunch Gym because my mom always instilled in me, you got to work out. And I happen to like working out. So that was my thing. Freshman year of college, I got really into it. I started doing all the crazy circuit lifting workouts. I started running. I was introduced to the idea of bikini competitions because somebody kind of like planted the seed. The bikini division was brand new, and back then it was completely different than what it was today, than what it is today. But I did actually compete in my first bikini competition when I was like 20 years old, and I was totally into bodybuilding ever since. Even though, like I said, I wasn't really that good at it. I didn't really look like a bodybuilder just yet. I did lose a lot of weight, but I didn't have the muscle. So ever since then, I've always been really like into bodybuilding as a fan, as a spectator, but that's really where my love for learning about training and lifting and nutrition. I got my degree in nutrition and dietetics. But that's really where my love for doing all of this started. And that's when I was like, you know what? I think when I graduate college, I want to train people. That was kind of the thing that made me say, I want to do this and I think I can make a career out of it.
Awesome, awesome.
How did you prepare for your first bikini competition?
Oh God, it was so different. So I actually bought an ebook. I bought a contest prep ebook on how to prep myself for my first bikini competition, and it had workouts in there, it had diet adjustments, and I did that for my first bikini show. And low key, if anybody listening has history with eating disorders or whatever, I was very much so there. In my head, everything I was doing was not motivated from like a healthy place. It was motivated from like, I want to push my body to the limits. I want to get as small as possible. So any day that I could do extra cardio or I could eat less, I would do that. So I wasn't totally following my contest prep ebook to the letter because I got like really hooked on it. And I started seeing the results and I was like, wow, I've never been small before. Because like I said, my whole childhood, I was always kind of like on the thicker, on the bigger side. And I was lifting and I was running a lot, but like I said, it was a lot of junk volume, lots of circuits, and the training I was doing was by no means optimal and doesn't look like the training I do today.
So when it comes to what you were doing back then, can you think of like a couple training mistakes that you were making back then that you kind of cringe at now?
Oh, 100%. So I'll kind of I'll open up a little bit more on what I mean by junk volume and circuits. So again, I was in this headspace of like more is better.
Yeah.
One thing that I always say now is like more isn't better, better is better. And I didn't make that up. I know lots of good coaches say the same exact thing. But back then, in my mind, I'm like, well, if you could do 4 sets of RDLs, why don't you just do 6 sets and like do some superset squat jump in between? And like I would write all my workouts down. And sometimes I would do like iPhone notes and whatever because it was a long time ago. It was like 12 years ago. So that would be my method of like tracking what I was doing. I would write things down. And rather than following a program, I would literally just be like trying to create the craziest, hardest workouts in my head that day before I would go into the gym. So I would use like the little contest prep ebook I had. The workouts in there were actually great if I would stick to them. But I would always be like, do that once. And then I was like, that wasn't enough for me. But it wasn't enough because the quality of the sets that I was doing was poor. And the form I was using, the reason my glutes never really grew that much is because I wasn't using the proper form to actually target my glutes. So my whole life, I'm like, I was a dancer, my quads, my hamstrings, like everything was already kind of developed. And I was like, why don't I have an ass? Like, why aren't my glutes growing? And it was always just like, that default to a very extended posture, always living in anterior pelvic tilt, which, everybody's, oh, that's not bad. It's not bad. It's really bad if you can't get out of that position.
Right.
So it's like I was living in this just like chest up and out, booty arched. And every time I would hinge, I would lunge, I would bridge, I was just doing like low back extension. So that was like, I would say training mistakes was just doing like way too much with not proper execution, not proper effort. And then again, just like execution positioning is a huge flaw for myself. And that's one of the most common things that I see with people that I work with or people that just like, I come across on the internet, they ask me, they DM me, whatever. Usually it's just like how your body is positioned.
How do you teach somebody to fix that?
Did you say, how do I teach?
How do you teach somebody to fix that? The anterior
So-
pelvic tilt, moving out of it. Like, what are some
So
things
it's much easier in person. I mean, all of us have worked with athletes and clients in person. It's so simple when they can see you and you can see them in 3D in real life. You can like, kind of put your hands on your lower hips or whatever. You can show them visually how to tuck, stack the ribs over the pelvis. But when it comes to working with people in an online setting, it's a little trickier. So usually I'll have somebody use the floor or a wall as a reference to teach them how to make their back flush with the wall or with the floor to find their rib pelvis stack. Sometimes we'll go super beginner. We'll work on like some pelvic tilts. So just laying on the floor with your knees bent, if our listeners can kind of like imagine what this looks like, lay on the floor with your knees bent, your feet flat on the ground, as if you're going to do a glute bridge. Make sure that you find that rib pelvis orientation. So your back should be squished against the floor. And then the pelvic tilting, you're just going to inhale and let your back arch away from the ground. And then exhale and pull down, pull your ribs down towards your pelvis. That can start to help the light bulb switch to go on in people's mind. But it takes a lot of time. And I always used to get very frustrated because I would be trying to like fix it myself. And then I would be doing these glute bridges and I felt like I wasn't getting up high enough, for example. And then I was like, wait, it's not about how high you get up off the floor. Like, we're not doing a back bend. It's about getting the glutes to work to extend your hips. So I've been through all of it myself and I understand the frustration. So when I help people, I kind of have that in mind, and I try to use, like I said, a wall or ground reference to help them to establish that neuromuscular connection.
Yeah, I know it's always easier in person, but I ask that because I think when people aren't growing their glutes, they think it's the workouts, but it's more so just like the execution. And but when you have somebody regress it to like its simplest form, it sounds like too easy to work, and people don't buy into that. So I wanted to hear it from a very credible person.
Yeah, and the other thing too is you can even use machines sometimes to their advantage. So let's say somebody can't maintain good pelvic positioning and you have to regress them to, like I said, supine pelvic tilts, maybe some glute bridges on the ground, but you could put them on a leg press, for example, because the back and the seat are going to stabilize their spine and their pelvis. It's going to provide them that reference to kind of push into, and they can work on getting a nice deep range of motion at the hips. In their brain, they might not realize it's glutes. But as long as they're getting access to that deep hip flexion, their glutes are stretching a lot under that load. And then maybe the next day they're going to wake up and be like, oh, I did work my glutes and I didn't just work my quads. So it's like you can use something like that so that they feel like they're still able to train hard, because you can tell them to like use a heavy leg press, or heavy is relative, but you know what I mean,
Right.
while we are working on building up their skill at something like a bridge, or using a hand assist on a split squat or a lunge variation, doing stuff like wall reference RDLs. Like there are all these progressions that we can use. But if somebody has been lifting for a long time, like you said, they might feel like this is so easy. I feel like I'm going backwards. So there's a fine balance in making sure that they are able to feel challenged in their program while you work on the skill of pelvic stability and coordination.
Yeah, for sure. Dom, you had something to say?
No, I was saying you definitely, that's definitely what happens a lot. Like so many people look at the workout and they're like, oh, I'm doing it. I'm not, this is not hard enough, or I'm not feeling it. But it's like, are you even in the best positions for your body to do those movements? And that's where, like, the little fine, minute details from another perspective's eye can help you. Just like how you said with the rear foot elevated split squat or the Bulgarian. So many people want to load that up and they're like, oh, if I use a hand assist, I'm cheating. But you're really not. You're putting yourself right now in the best optimal position to get out of that movement what you need.
Yeah. I also think when it comes to these mid and length range exercises, you don't get that same sensation in the glutes. A lot of people, if they just like they'll squeeze their glutes really hard at the top of a bridge or a hip thrust or a glute kickback. And to them, that makes them feel like they're doing it right because they can feel it. But it takes a while to understand what the stretch feels like in the glutes, especially if you've always kind of had trouble with your pelvic positioning, because you'll tend to feel your hamstrings and adductors more on an RDL, for example, if you're not able to keep that pelvic positioning, because you're going to go into this crazy arch. Or if you're doing like, if you're rounding your spine a lot, you might feel your low back a lot when you hinge. Same thing, split squats, lunges. If somebody's not good at really like keeping the pelvic shape and getting the glute to stretch around the pelvis, they might always feel their quads. They might not ever really feel the glutes. So if we give them a hand assist and make sure they do it at least 1 or 2 sessions a week for like a month, they might actually have enough stability and be able to work in a controlled fashion through that exercise. Like I said, 4 to 8 times total. If we think 1 to 2 sessions a week for a month, it's not that many times, but it's enough times to actually be like, oh, light bulb moment, I get it. And then they can start progressing with the load.
No, that totally makes sense. Sometimes you
You
got to
know,
regress to progress.
yeah, and again, it's that whole like sensation thing. People
Right.
get really hooked on it, and I understand, because a lot of our clients don't have the same knowledge as any of us regarding how muscles work. So to them, they assume that they should be feeling it a lot during the set itself. But as any of us could attest to, if you're in a really hard set of any compound exercise, you're probably not feeling a whole lot in that tissue. And then all of a sudden you put the weights down and it's pumped and it's on fire.
Yes.
Because when you're in a set, your brain wants you to safely get through the exercise. So it's like then you put the weights down, like Bulgarians, for example. Once I put that weight down, I'm like, holy crap, like my glute feels inflated. But during the exercise itself, it's not the same sensation as doing a glute kickback, for example.
I think that's also why people like that don't have the knowledge, they gravitate towards like the more like activation exercises or isolation exercises, and that's the bulk of their program because they're going solely based on feeling.
Yeah, everything short position because again, there's a high degree of sensation. Same thing if you think about a bicep curl. Like duh, anybody can feel that. But ultimately, if you only do short position exercises, you're missing out on a ton of potential hypertrophy.
For sure. You talked about obviously preparing for your first bikini competition and then graduating and wanting to train people. How did you get started with training people? And did you feel like you just threw like the bodybuilding style at them, or did you have different forms of training clients?
So my first certification was in high school. I actually got like the AFA group fitness instructor certification. So I was able, and I taught dance in high school. And then once I was in college, I started like subbing some group fitness classes here and there because I got my certification, right? And while I was in college, I ended up working at Equinox at the front desk. And I very much so became like the front desk girl, right? Because I have like a brain that works and the members liked me. So, and the management always liked me because I was always on time, did a job, whatever. So I was like, I was in the environment, right? I was in the gym. I knew all the trainers. I got to sub a few classes here and there. And then I ended up getting my personal training certification and just started like training friends. Like not even charging them. I would train them. Some of them would pay me, but like I would never ask, right? I just wanted to learn how to train people that were not myself. So I would either train them in real time, or I started like writing programs for them on a spreadsheet. And I was like, okay, like this is what we're going to do with you. And like I said, I wouldn't charge at first. I was just genuinely trying to see like, can I help this person either in real life or through the internet? And then when I graduated college, I moved to California. I moved to Los Angeles and I started working full time as a trainer. I worked at David Barton Gym, and my training manager was awesome. Like she was a great mentor for me in that moment because she basically taught me how to not be a horrible trainer. Like when it comes to, okay, if you have an assessment and you see them reach overhead in a lat pull down and they can't reach their arms overhead, you understand that you're not going to have that person do a shoulder press. Just basic stuff like that. That sure, like I got my certification, but it's different when you're working with all different types of people with different bodies and different capacities. So I worked that training job like any client I could book. I would work 8, 9, 10 hours a day if I could book it. And I did that for like 4 or 5 years. So I got a lot of experience there.
Can you talk about how that benefited you now when you do online? Because I feel like online is such a popular thing and it has a low barrier to entry. So, how do you think having that in person experience has made you a better online coach?
Yeah, so the beauty of working in person, especially like I taught group fitness also because at David Barton, the trainers would also be the small and large group fitness instructors. So just the number of bodies that I was able to watch and instruct in real time, we develop pattern recognition. And this is one thing as a coach that is immensely helpful. You can look at somebody and kind of understand what issue they might have, or just the general understanding that most people cannot do a basic squat, for example. So I understand that when I'm working with somebody in an online or remote context, first and foremost, that I need to see a video of them train, a video of them do these basic exercises before I give them a program, if possible. Now, it's not always possible to see everybody. Some people don't want to film themselves, whatever, whatever. So I understand in my mind, we're going to start with a goblet squat to a box because I just have in my head pattern recognition. Most people cannot put a barbell on their back and squat well. If you get somebody who comes to you with a history of CrossFit or college athletics, that's very different than somebody who submits their questionnaire and they work at a law firm and maybe they do Barry's boot camp and Pilates once a week. You know, these are two very different archetypes of people.
You had something, sorry, you kind of.
No, go ahead.
All right. No, I was gonna say, I agree. I think just blindly prescribing exercises is kind of like, I think it's like negligent. Going from online to, I mean, in person into more so online, can you tell like the audience the types of like clientele that you work with? Because you mentioned like somebody who works at like the office desk and then an athlete. What types of people do you primarily work with?
Yeah, so this also goes back to the question that I didn't answer, which is, was I primarily prescribing more like bodybuilding workouts for these people, right? And I've never been like that. I quite honestly have only really like leaned into the whole bodybuilding for myself over the past 4 or 5 years. So when I got started, again, I was working with all different types of people, and the buildings and like corporate relationships that a lot of our members had were like video game people and just like lots of people who sit down a lot, right? Those were like a lot of the surrounding buildings to my gym were, you know, very beginner when it comes to weight training. So just being able to, when it comes to training in real life versus training people remotely, the exposure you get to different demographics is different, because when you mainly market yourself online, you can kind of project a certain image and therefore attract the type of clientele that you might want to work with. So a lot of my clientele now are also fitness industry professionals. Like I have like registered dietitians, I got physical therapists like Kayani. I have other clinicians, you know, group fitness instructors, trainers, other coaches. A lot of my clientele are rather my peers. And then the others that come to me tend to be intermediate lifters. I would say it's pretty rare that I get a straight up beginner, can't do a squat. I do love when I get that, but it's rare that I get that. And as far as like the way that I train people, it's never from a purely bodybuilding lens, right? Because even if you are a bodybuilder, we need to understand movement first and foremost. Because if you can't move well, you are not going to be able to successfully bodybuild well, because you need to be able to move well through said movement patterns to really target the tissues we're looking for with each movement. So I'm always like a client centered person first and foremost. I look at the body, I look at the way you move, and then we factor in the goals at hand to create a workout program that makes sense for you.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say Coach Liz is for everybody.
I mean, hey, there's my catchphrase right there. Like, thank you for bringing it up. Coach Liz is for everybody. I have trained like one of my first like big cases as a baby trainer, if you will. I was in the gym. This guy had a tragic accident and he was in a wheelchair. He was supposed to be with one of our head trainers. Head trainer didn't show up to work that day, and I trained this guy, and he ended up training with me for like 6 months. And that was one of my first, you know, like hard cases, if you will, because every single session he was in a chair. And I had to just like think on the fly, how do I give this guy, you know, like a stimulating, a successful but safe workout?
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like you figure it out, you know?
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, how long was that session?
How
Like,
long? Oh, it was a full hour, 55 minutes.
55 minutes? Oh, yeah, that's a lot to do in the chair.
Yeah, one of my first clients was in a wheelchair as well.
And like, fortunately for him, he was able to make a full recovery. So like during the period of time that we worked together, he was in his physical therapy, he was progressing to getting out of the chair and like learning to walk again and stuff like that. But the entire time that we worked together, he was pretty much, he had to be seated the entire time until the very end, when he was allowed to like do the recumbent bike for like 10 minutes before our workout.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, like I said, I was a baby trainer, and like it just so happened because the head trainer, whatever, happened to be very unreliable. He didn't show up for work, And this guy rolls in, literally, and everybody's kind of scrambling. Like, I was there because I was always at the gym. I was always there. And my training manager said, like, hey Liz, like, do you feel comfortable? And I was like, hell yeah. I was like, put me in, coach.
Now
Could
that's
we?
that's like the biggest thing though with, to me, why the beauty of in-person training is because so many, like now it's like how Keanu was saying, anybody right now could be like, oh, I'm an online trainer. But it's like, yes, you can do it and have never trained anybody. But when you're working with people like that are like have injuries, quadriplegic, autism, different frameworks of life, like you have to be able to navigate all of those things. Or you can always say, hey, those people aren't for me, but then you're missing out on becoming the best type of trainer or coach that you possibly can be. Like how you said,
Absolutely.
Liz, with the whole online, you can kind of pick who you want to train, right? But like in person, I'm sure we've all had it where it's like when you're doing in-person training and you're just starting, you're trying to eat as well. So you'll take, you don't want to say it like that, but you'll take whoever comes through that door sometimes. And it may be that person, but that may be the best thing that actually happens to you from a coaching perspective, mind state, and all of that.
Absolutely. And honestly, training and coaching, people always joke that personal trainers are like actually therapists, which we're not, but there's a huge psychological component to training and coaching. And it's amplified when it comes to the online space because most of the communication is occurring through text. So you have to kind of be able to read people through the lines. I mean, I do a Zoom call with all my remote clients at least once a month. I send a lot of voice messages and stuff too because I always want to make sure that they don't think I'm being mean, right? Because sometimes things get lost through text. But working in person with, like I said, every type of person you can imagine. I've worked with clients that literally did not like me but kept buying more packages. And it's like you learn to work with every personality type, and it helps you so much when it comes to working in the online space.
Most definitely.
Speaking of, it has a big psychological aspect to it. I think it's important that we touch on like the emotional stuff that comes along with people stepping on a scale.
Yeah.
Can you talk about your view on that? Like how often people should be weighing themselves, why it's important, and what somebody should do if they feel any like visceral feeling when they see the number on the scale.
Yeah, so first and foremost, again, this is where we have to say trainers and coaches, we are not licensed therapists, but we're kind of a middleman because we are working with people and we're talking about bodies, body image, relationships with food. Those are sensitive topics for a lot of people. So the more we are able to lead with objectivity, the better. So a lot of times people will come to me and they have like little hangups with scale, body weight, talking about objective metrics like body fat, so on and so forth. So all I can do is acknowledge that their feelings exist, right? Because I'm not going to tell them that they're wrong, but I can at least say we are only tracking this as a means of data. And when it comes to your weekly check in with me, for example, it helps me as a coach to understand better what is happening with your body at this point in time if I can see the trend on the scale. Now, if somebody comes to me and they explicitly tell me that the scale creates negative feelings for them, they're not maybe ready to use the scale, I'm not going to mandate it because I want to help them to make any positive change possible. But if they tell me I'm open to it, but it does make me anxious or whatever, I just try to explain again, we're not looking for a lower number every day. We're not looking for a higher number every day. I want to use it as a means of data. Just like when it comes to tracking food, I say if you're supposed to eat, let's say, 4 ounces of chicken, if you put it on the scale and it says 4.2, are you going to be, is the chicken wrong? No, it's just a different number. And again, when it goes back to objectivity, we can tell our clients the factors that mostly influence the scale on a day to day basis, which is going to be fluid and electrolyte balance. So I try to remind people any given day that you get on the scale, it's going to fluctuate based on your hydration status, based on if you've had good bowel movements, if you had really hard workouts for like 2, 3 days in a row, your body weight very well might go up. Just because it's overall inflammation, it's got to clear out. So when I can explain to them why the scale might do one thing or another, and make sure we have an understanding that it's the trend that we are looking for as a means of data, that can oftentimes help them to not feel as anxious about getting on the scale every day to see that number and track it to see trend over time.
Yeah, I 1000% agree. I didn't realize how much of a I don't know the word for it, but I didn't realize how much people hated stepping on the scale until like recently when I see it so often. And I think once you like remove the emotion out of it and you view things objectively, I think you can make more progress on whatever goal. Because it's not like you're going to step on the scale and all of a sudden gain 15 pounds. I think the people who like gain weight, like a year goes by and they're like, oh, I gained 15 pounds. I think it's because they're like avoiding the data. But if you have that, then you can use it to make decisions off of it.
Yeah, you know, and a lot of people out there, they want to do this whole body recomp. And I know this is such a hot topic, but if you're not tracking data
Come
and
on.
you wear stretchy clothes
Come on.
every single day, how are you? Oh, and you refuse to track your food. How in the world are you supposed to change your body composition, which is an objective metric, mind you? Your body composition is how much fat versus how much muscle exists on your body, or how much lean mass, if we want to think about water. If you're not tracking anything, you're not weighing yourself, you're not getting any sort of like body fat assessment done on a every monthly basis or whatever, you're just like throwing shit at the wall and hoping something sticks. So it's like we can't manage what we don't measure. So if we're able to collect data, which is why I say try to weigh yourself every day. So you have 7 data points at the end of the week. And then over time, you can actually see, is something happening on the scale? Because you're not going to body recomp your way to a body that looks 20 pounds leaner.
Do you get people coming to you who want to recomp?
I do, but usually they're confused.
Right.
So when I hear that goal, that's when I ask questions. And that's again, that's one of the things that I've learned is oftentimes if you just ask somebody to expand upon what they might mean, they themselves realize that they don't really know. So you don't have to be the asshole making them feel dumb, being like, "Oh, body recomp isn't real, toning isn't real." Ask them the question, and then they usually kind of like, "Oh, wait. So I do want to lose body fat. That is what I want to do." And they arrive at that conclusion themselves.
Yeah. I think I used to be that person that's like, you can't tone a muscle and things like that. But in reality, all people are saying is that they want to lose body fat and have their muscles be more visible. I think when people talk about recomp, I think they're just describing a fat loss phase, but it's just such like a buzzword that's going around
Yeah.
social media. They don't know what it actually means. So I think asking the question, yes, it reveals what they mean, and then I also think as an online coach, I feel like the questions is like pretty much gonna make or break how you can actually help somebody. If you don't ask the questions, you don't really know what the person is. Once you're just giving out workouts.
Yeah, and we all have very different ideas of what lean looks like or what toned looks like. I'm a bodybuilder. So what I consider to be muscular is very different than what a lot of general population people might consider to be muscular. So if I get a woman, for example, who tells me she wants to be like lean and toned, I will oftentimes ask for a reference picture because to me, in my head, it looks a lot different. If I get a guy who tells me he wants to like trim down or he wants to lean out, then he shows me a picture of like Saquon Barkley. And I'm like, do you realize how huge that man is? You know, so it's like I like to ask these questions because we all have different ideas of what certain physiques look like in our brain.
Speaking of like having a different perspective of what like lean or muscular is, when you have somebody who wants to, I guess, like do the bodybuilding style of training but don't necessarily want to compete, how do you my question is like, how do you get them to like buy in? Because I feel like once you mention bodybuilding style, like people think that you're going to train them to become a bodybuilder. Like, do you get those people? Like, how do you like encourage them to go along with it? Because I feel like there's people who deep down inside do like the style of bodybuilding, but
Mhm.
they don't want to, I don't know why, be seen as like somebody who's prepping for a competition.
Yeah, so we were chatting about this off camera a little bit. So good time to like bring it onto the podcast is the difference between being a competitive bodybuilder, meaning your training is highly specified with the goal of stepping on stage, versus somebody who just wants to be like lean, muscular, kind of look bodybuilder-ish, right? And there are a lot of habits that any person can take from bodybuilding to live a healthier, more fit life. Like, for example, cooking most of your food, learning how to weigh your food, and understanding what portions look like. That's a really good practice for maintaining overall good long term nutrition habits, good body composition, learning how to follow a structured workout program, which honestly a lot of bodybuilders don't even do, but that's a whole separate topic for another day. But learning how to execute a movement for the target musculature. So rather than just doing a bent over row because somebody said it was best for you, versus maybe using a chest supported row so that you can actually benefit from your torso being stabilized, so you can really better engage and recruit the muscles in your mid, upper, lats, whatever grip you want to use, right? That's kind of bodybuilding specific, but it just falls under the umbrella of strength training in general. So if someone comes to me and they're like, well, I kind of like the bodybuilding thing, but I don't want to be like a competitive bodybuilder, it all comes back to the client goal. I'm like, okay, so you want to kind of look like a bodybuilder. You don't have muscles like a bodybuilder yet. So we got to eat and train kind of like a bodybuilder. The main difference is that that lifestyle person is never going to get as lean as you need to get on stage, because that's not beneficial for your health, mental nor physical. And they're never going to have to push to the other extreme end when it comes to building muscle. Maybe that means anabolics, maybe that means pushing food really, really high. They're never going to have to swing to either extreme of the pendulum. But this middle ground, where it might get kind of hard when you're dieting sometimes, and it might get kind of hard when you're building sometimes, but it's overall, it's like a healthy place to live in. And if somebody wants to be jacked or they want to be lean, they got to borrow habits from bodybuilders, because that's who does it best.
So how do you reframe that, knowing that we understand the levers that you have to pull and how most people need to be here, but everybody's either here or here? How do you get more people to understand that, like, you're like, oh, as the client, oh, I want to put on 20 pounds of muscle in the next 12 weeks? Well, we know that's not really possible unless you are using, you know, anabolics or, you know, peptides per se or things of that nature, or like you said, pushing food. Because then once you get to talking about pushing food, 99% of people right now think you're supposed to be living life in a deficit. So they don't even understand that whole aspect of the understanding of what it takes. And they feel like what they see from a perspective is based off of how you make your algorithm look, right? Everybody's a bodybuilder, which is not true. That's like 1% of people. But then it's like so many people take their basic general health and push it to the extreme without even having the habits of mastering the basics. So how do you, I guess, how do you get people to understand that, like, hey, those goals that you say you want, gonna take a lot more time than you think, because you don't even have the basic of habits long term and consistency wise to get there.
Yeah, so this is really important. And it just comes down to conversation, you know? If I have a conversation with somebody, whether it's an intro consult or if we're in a coaching relationship and we've been working together for a few weeks, we can draw out a timeline. And if they tell me, for example, if somebody gave me a goal of, let's say, make it more realistic, let's say they want to put on 5 pounds of muscle in 6 months. That's still not happening for most people. But what I can explain to this, especially a woman, what I can explain to this person is, okay, you ultimately want to gain 5 pounds of muscle, but based on the lack of consistency in your habits, it's unlikely that you are going to maintain your results in the long term if you don't have this lifestyle down to the point where it feels like you're on autopilot. So things like tracking your food, because regardless if you're in a deficit, maintenance, surplus, you need to have an understanding of how much you are taking in. And then if we take our nutrition one step further, the actual nutrition and the micronutrients and the fiber, we need to have a healthy body that's going to respond well to training and recovering from said training if we want to put on any muscle to begin with. So, what I'll often have people do is commit verbally to me that we're going to do at least 4, if not 8 weeks of straight up habit building. So, you need to show me that you can track your food, do your workouts, get your steps in. If we have programmed cardio, you got to show me that you could do your cardio for 4 to 8 weeks without worrying about what the scale says. The scale, if we do this right, shouldn't really change a whole lot. You got to show me that you can lock in. Everybody's favorite phrase. You got to show me that you can lock in without some extreme goal working as extrinsic motivation for you. You have to be able to embrace this whole process as a lifestyle because things like motivation and willpower are finite resources. So if it doesn't feel genuinely like aligned with your spirit, that might sound corny, I don't care. It's not going to be sustainable long term.
Right. Right.
So that's
Definitely.
ultimately the conversation we have to have. And with big goals, like putting on 10 to 20 pounds of muscle or losing 20 to 30 pounds of body fat, for example, those big goals can feel quite intimidating and harder to maintain commitment to over that long period of time. So I like to set little goals along the way. You know, if somebody wants to put on 20 pounds of tissue, I might say, okay, we're going to commit to this 6-month build phase, and we're going to look at your training metrics, and we're going to try to progress XYZ exercises, and we're going to try to put, let's say, 1 inch on your shoulder circumference and your glute circumference to break that goal into something smaller. Or if somebody wants to lose 20, 30 plus pounds of body fat, that's a big goal. That takes a long time. So I might say, let's look at this next 3 to 5 pounds. Let's try to get it done in less than 6 weeks.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
I like that process. I think anytime you have a really big goal, it makes more sense to just break it up into smaller, more achievable goals. I can't find words to that. I was going to ask, what are the like top 5 habits, whether it's combining training and nutrition, that people could take away just to live a healthier life, like whether it's losing fat, maintaining their weight, or gaining weight? Because I feel like there's some commonalities between all those things that people can take away from.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I'm always saying, like, Coach Liz is for everybody, and ultimately we want to be healthy, right? And healthy is not extreme. So if we're going to think about 5 habits to maintain a healthy overall lifestyle, healthy body composition, first and foremost, I would say move your body an hour every day. Move your body. I don't care if you break it up into little 10 to 15-minute walks, if you do work out at the gym, anything. Because again, anybody who's listening to this, whether you're like a gym rat or a sedentary person, I want you to benefit. So move your body for 1 hour every single day. It can be broken up into chunks. You could do it all at once, but that's like a ride or die habit for me, unless you're like sick on your deathbed. Move your body 1 hour every day. Number 2 is drink more water. All right. Lots of people out there walking around dehydrated. The skin is dry. The bowels aren't moving because there's no fluid in there. When you work out, you might feel like you're cramping. You don't have good workouts. You'll be dehydrated. So that's my second habit. And don't go drink a gallon a day if you're used to only drinking 2 glasses. You know, gradually scale your intake up. try to do 2 liters a day of plain water. And if you drink more than that, beautiful. The third one, purposeful resistance training. So this is building on that whole move your body for an hour every day. But every single person, if you can lift weights 2 to 3 times a week, please, your joints, your bones, your mental health, everything. Lifting weights has so many benefits. Please go lift something. Number 4, fruits and vegetables.
Come on now.
Fruits and vegetables, because not just the fiber, but the micronutrients. The more colors, the more variety that you consume through produce, the more beneficial bacteria you can feed your gut. Again, micronutrients, not just macronutrients. Macronutrients is our proteins, fats, and carbs. Yes, that's important, but the micros for your insides. And number 5, recovery, sleep. If you can sleep 7+ hours every night, which honestly, most people can be in bed 7 to 8 hours before they're supposed to wake up. Put the phone away. Put the phone away. If you need to put your phone in a different room, get yourself an alarm clock, whatever, please sleep. We are all glued to our phones. So at least like the 30 minutes before you're supposed to be going to sleep, don't be looking at the screen. So that's my 5th is sleep.
When you say veggies, can you talk about how much veggies? Because the serving size on some of these on the veggies is not enough. And I think that whenever I have a client, they're looking at veggies, they're like, "Oh, I did a serving." I'm like, "You need to like probably eat that whole bag in that meal."
Yeah, for sure. And the reason I said fruits and veggies is because when it comes to just general people, some people are going to give you the whole, I don't like vegetables. So if that I don't like vegetables person, if we can at least get them to eat fruits, then at least they are going to get micronutrients and fiber and water content and all that good stuff. But when it comes to vegetables, a standard serving, look, a lot of people are not going to weigh their broccoli on a scale, okay? But a standard serving of vegetables is typically 85 grams raw. That typically is like a really big handful. But again, who is taking a giant handful of broccoli? I'm not. So, what I like to tell people is if you have a plate or a bowl, make sure your vegetables take up at least half, unless you are using a giant plate or something of that nature. The amount of vegetables that most people serve themselves, like you said, is so small.
Yeah.
So if we can get them to like double or triple that, and they're eating veggies 1 or 2 times a day, they're probably going to end up closer to the ballpark range that I like to recommend, which is 300 grams per day as a minimum.
Yep.
So if you can make yourself like a big stir fry meal or a big salad, or it's wintertime and a lot of people in cold climates they like soup. Soup is a really good underrated way to get in a lot of veggies, and they are cooked so they're easy to digest. So when it comes to veggies, if you look at a bag that has a label on it, it's going to say a serving is 85 grams. That is one little baby serving. We want to try to get 300 plus grams per day. Same thing goes with fruit. Most fruit servings, unless it's a whole fruit like an apple, banana, orange, whatever, if you look at berries, they're going to say a serving is 100 grams, for example. That's great, but give yourself more than that. Because when it comes to fruits and veggies, those also tend to be lower in total calories and higher in food volume. So it's much harder to overeat fruits and vegetables to the point of taking in too many calories to maintain or lose weight.
Yeah.
Have you guys heard of I don't want to get her name wrong. She's a level 3 CrossFit coach. I think she's a dietitian. EC Sayanoski. She has the 800 gram challenge.
No, but I think a lot of people do that, and I love that.
Yeah, 800 grams, which is roughly 6 cups of fruits and vegetables per day. And then she allows you got to eat that first with your protein, right? And then she allows you to eat whatever else you want, knowing primarily that you're going to get full on the fruits and vegetables. So that's another concept that I've used, ranging from the 300 to the 800. And it does help because, like you said, most people aren't getting enough of those things, especially now when you're dealing with everybody wanting to attempt, keto type things and carnivore, and not understanding that those are protocols more than they are, set lifestyles. So I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like another issue, quite honestly, is a lot of people are using GLP-1s now, and the way those drugs work is by literally making you not want to eat. So
Right.
a lot of people on those drugs are not consuming fruits and vegetables, at least not in large quantities, because fruits and vegetables make you quite full on a low number of calories. What ends up happening is these people, yeah, sure, they're losing weight because they're taking in less total calories, but they're developing micronutrient deficiencies. So it's like if we actually just use volume eating, if you will, to our advantage, we can get great results if fat loss is the goal, because veggies and lower calorie fruits, like berries, for example, happen to be like lower in calories than something like
Love it.
mangoes. Mangoes, bananas, the tropical fruits tend to be much higher in carbohydrate and lower in food volume. That doesn't mean you shouldn't eat them. That is not what I'm saying. I'm just talking about straight up food volume. If you eat lots of fruits and veggies, it makes you pretty full on less total calories, helps you have really good bowel movements, and helps you to lose weight and have good nutrition while you're in a calorie deficit.
But what about the
So that's
sugar?
why, what was that?
But what about the sugar? Sugar's bad for you.
Oh yeah, what about the sugar? What about the sugar? Yeah, we don't need to be concerned, especially because if we are leaning into fruits that do have high fiber content, that is going to alter the blood sugar response as is. But even in the event that you're concerned with like glycemic load or the glycemic index, blood sugar spiking, first and foremost, if you don't have diabetes or you don't have a blood sugar related condition, our bodies figure all that shit out. If
Okay.
you want to have a banana before you work out, the banana, boom, it's right there. Our bodies do this amazing thing where they take carbohydrates and use them for energy. So if you are concerned with blood sugar and you have no blood sugar related condition, just eat your carbohydrates with a source of protein and fiber. You know, that's all we need to do.
Speaking of conditions, and I think this is a good transition from the habits because I think the habits go into what I'm going to ask as well. But PCOS,
Mhm.
people who have PCOS or they're diagnosing themselves with that. I feel like they think they have to eat in a certain way and train in a certain way. Can you elaborate on like what's the best way to eat and train when you have that condition?
Yes, and let me give the disclaimer first and foremost, hashtag not medical advice. But and I myself have been diagnosed with PCOS in the past. I quite frankly don't think about it anymore because I don't think I do, but I might. I might. Hey, the most important thing when whether you have PCOS, Hashimoto's, any sort of label, if you will, we need to remember that you are a human first and foremost. And when it comes to PCOS, there is still so much unknown. So if you don't have blood work done, you have no way of confirming if you do, in fact, have insulin resistance. That needs to be your first step, first and foremost, is actually figure out what's going on inside. But when it comes to habits, diet, lifestyle, we need to understand that you don't need to eat no carbs just because you have PCOS. It's just in the same way that somebody with diabetes doesn't need to adhere to an ultra low carb diet. They simply need to be more cognizant of how many carbohydrates they eat and tend to lean towards fibrous carbohydrates and making sure they consume carbs with protein and or fiber to slow that insulin release. When it comes to PCOS, if we are concerned with weight loss, you need to be in a calorie deficit. Oftentimes, and I actually was like posting some screenshots from these studies and meta analyses the other day on my story, there is a high correlation between binge eating disorder and women with PCOS. So a lot of people with PCOS, they struggle a lot emotionally, and oftentimes they feel that that PCOS diagnosis is going to impair or impede their body's ability to lose weight, and therefore binge eating can often be a coping mechanism. Binge eating also tends to be more prevalent when you undergo really restrictive diet protocols. So a lot of people with PCOS will try to go ultra low carbohydrate, maybe even removing fruits from their diet, and that's not sustainable. So what ends up happening, they go really hardcore for like 3 or 4 days at a time, and then it falls apart and they binge eat. So over time, that pattern results in either a net kind of like an even calorie balance, if you will, so they're not in a deficit any further. Or if you really binge eat, you can put yourself in a calorie surplus. So therefore, like you're trying so hard to lose weight for like 3 or 4 days in a row, but then if you binge really badly for a couple days following, now you have actually shifted the energy balance into a surplus. So you feel like you're working really hard, but now there's all these other factors and variables, not to mention all of the inflammation that comes along with binge eating and the digestive distress, all these issues, and it's like it's cyclical. So a lot of times it's not necessarily the PCOS that's getting in the way. And a lot of times, if individuals with PCOS would just follow the general rules for a healthy fat loss diet, they would see much better results because it would be more sustainable and there would be less urge to binge. Now, of course, if you have binge eating problems or any eating disorder behavior whatsoever, you do want to see a licensed professional and stop listening to people like myself right now on podcasts.
Yes, I 1,000% agree. I think like the commonality between all these things that we've been talking about just comes back down to like habits
Mhm.
and not trying to go from 0 to 100 all in one day or 1 week and like building up to that so you can sustain it.
Yeah.
Speaking of, and I'm gonna tell myself with this because we were talking about it yesterday, but back to training and having a goal and having exercises that should be executed for that goal, but you hate them.
Mhm.
Talk about why people should be doing the exercises that they actually don't want to do.
So most often, after I talk, I want to hear Coach Dom on this one as well. So most often, we hate exercises that we are not good at. So if we hate an exercise because we're just not good at it, maybe we don't feel the target muscle working very well, maybe it challenges and frustrates us, that exposes something that we should probably look into strengthening. So Kayani brought this up because when she trains at home, we have Meadows rows in her programming because that's a suitable option to overload a single arm row exercise. And every time she does them, she's like, I hate this. Like, it's just not clicking very well. But the weak link is scapular control
Yep.
and understanding exactly where to pull that barbell. You know, where should the positioning of her torso be relative to the ground? What should her shoulder positioning be like? You know, so these are issues and they pop up, but every time she sends me a video of them, they are actually improving.
Okay.
So oftentimes,
Last
like,
time you improved a little bit.
yeah, and I didn't get to rip apart the most recent video that you did send, but it's like every time there are little improvements. And it's like all the exercise I used to hate single leg anything. Why did I hate it? Because I had no pelvic stability and I was just like quadding and low backing my way through everything. And then I was so tired of my own bullshit, I became obsessed with every type of lunge and split squat you can imagine. And now like that like literally changed the way that I'm able to train not only my glutes but my entire lower body, and also influenced the way that I'm able to help other clients that struggle with the same thing that I did. So oftentimes if you're really bad at something, it's because, I mean, if you hate something, it is because you're just not good at it and it's exposing a weak link. But by strengthening those weak links, we can oftentimes make positive changes, not only to the way you execute that movement, but to other movements that probably train the same muscles.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go totally agree with you because I'm like the world's most inflexible person. Like I hate back squatting because it just doesn't it's never clicked for me. So I literally told myself yesterday was like 2026, I'm gonna master every type of split squat that there is. From Bulgarian to front foot to knee over toe. Like that's how I'm gonna strengthen my mobility, flexibility, and my strength at the end of the day, right? I'm going to take my weaknesses and my ankles and just build that shit up. So
Yeah.
I do it that way. There's no longer an excuse because I don't have to back squat. I can belt squat. I can hack squat. I can leg press, all those type of things. And then as far as you, Kiani, not liking the medals row, I actually love the medals row. I know that you have this goal to get your pull-ups up, right? And if you're not feeling that retraction of the scap, if you're doing like that wide elbow, that's almost the same pattern. So as you get more proficient in that movement, I guarantee you in the long run, by spring, summer, your pull-ups are going to take a jump, and then it's all gonna click for you. So
Yeah,
I'm all for it, and I'm very big on like the mantra of like, doing the hard things, right? If you do the things that you're not good at, you will get better. Like I don't know if you guys know Martin Rooney, he was like the first UFC strength and conditioning coach, and I took his courses years ago called Training for Warriors, and he used to always ask us, right? When is the last, and you heard me say it, Kiani, when is the last time you brushed your teeth with the opposite hand? You had no reason to do that, right? But if you did it first, it's going to be challenging. It's not going to make sense. But the more you get repetitive with it, just like habits and tracking, you're naturally going to get better at those things. So I agree with Liz. Like
I agree too. And that's part of the reason why I even work with Liz, because I can say this stuff, but having somebody hold you accountable is different. But with the medals rows, however you say it, I hate that exercise. I think what is so hard about it is that the landmine is like you can always adjust the position. So the setup, I can never get the setup right. But once I get a couple decent reps in, it feels a little better. But then I turn around to the other side, I gotta reset all over. And I think that's the part that throws me off. At this point,
I also think. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say at this point, I just want to buy heavier dumbbells so I could just do a single arm dumbbell row at home because I don't want to do it. But
I honestly think since you have in your head that you don't like the exercise, you're not thinking logically when you go set up.
Because you're already pissed off.
Exactly. You're frustrated.
I watched the video that you sent me to the last time I did it. You was like, can you set up with this stance? I watched it every single time I set up and it helped.
So
it's like if you're like pissed off and frustrated, like because you're like, oh God, I'm working out at home today, I have to do meadows rows, you just kind of give it like a dear damn.
Yeah.
Instead of like if you love a certain exercise, like you're like, let's say like Romanian deadlifts, like you got your setup locked in, before you do your first rep, you're gonna like stack the ribs over the pelvis, you're tightening your lats. You hate medals rows, so you're just gonna be like, oh, let me bend over and do this shit. And then you might be like, the landmine is too far forward, or you're not holding the end of the sleeve the right way, or like you just get annoyed.
I'm gonna do it like I love it next time.
That's what you gotta
try.
do.
Yeah.
Honestly, try it. Honestly, like Coach Dom was talking about squats, I used to very much be the same way, especially because I spent so many years trying to avoid using my quads by all means necessary. I was like, I don't need more quads. I don't need more quads. So no squats, no leg presses, trying to do everything to avoid using them. Needless to say, I lost the ability to maintain like vertical translation of my pelvis. And I was doing some goblet squats one day because I wanted to film a video for my clients. And it was anybody who doesn't have like a coach's eye was like, that's a great squat. But my good old homie, Coach Smooth, he responded to my story and he says, I can tell you don't squat. And I said, God damn, you're so right. But like he called me out. He's like, yeah, you put your butt back and not down. And I was like, God, you're so right. And I fixed it because I was like, I want to be able to give my clients like good demo videos. And if I want them to be able to squat pretty vertically, I should be able to do that too. So I just got like really obsessed with being able to like squat my ass to the ground without sticking it out.
Speaking of not trying to use your quads, I feel like that's a big thing online. People are like, oh, I need to make this more glute dominant because I don't want to use my quads. Can you talk about how your quads are still going to be working in any like single leg split squat position or split stance position to grow your glutes?
So also let me give context. This was for bodybuilding purposes. right? Like the bikini division until more recently was not letting you get away with having big quads on stage. It was really about the glutes, allowed to have a little bit of quad and hamstring, but my quads have always been so much more developed than my posterior chain. So for me, I was so obsessed with trying to like get the glutes and hamstrings up, but not the quads. And my overall lower body development suffered for it because if we don't use the quads, which for those of you listening, if you don't know, anytime you bend and straighten your knee, guess what does that? Your quads. We need our quads to work. If we want to lunge, if we want to split squat, if we want to do anything knee bending, you have to use your quads. What ends up happening if you're trying to do split squats, squats, lunges, and make them like only, I'm using quotes, only glutes, you end up doing a hinge. So it's like if you don't want to use your quads, just do RDLs, do B stance RDLs. Don't do shitty lunges and split squats. If you think your quads are too big and you've never been lean, your quads probably are not too big. There's just body fat there, which is fine. But a lot of women in particular, they think they are quad dominant, but their quads are actually weak. There's just body fat. You might not like the shape of them, but I guarantee you, if you were to get very lean, you would realize you're not quad dominant. You just had body fat there. Or maybe your glutes and your hamstrings are just smaller in proportion to your quads. So by building up the posterior aspect, everything will fall into balance. Right. And this is one of those times when you never want to tell somebody, like, oh, your quads are weak and fat. That's really awful. Like, don't do that. But what you can explain is that we need to use our quads in order to use good form. And so, therefore, we can load the glutes appropriately when we lunge or leg press or split squat. So, it's like if you want your butt to grow, you've got to do those exercises because they're so good at putting load into the glutes. And your quads aren't going to grow that much if you're not using a very quad biased stance and if you're not making the quads the primary driver of that exercise.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think people overlook the importance of like volume throughout your program. So I think if you have a program that's designed for like glute growth and not prioritizing quads, I think you can do like split squats and lunges without blowing up your quads.
Yeah, well, and like what muscle is failing on the exercise? If your quads are like 3, 4 reps shy from failure, but your glutes are failing, then okay, cool. Good, 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 good. But again, like I said, a lot of people, I'm especially talking to women here because I work with a lot of women and we do tend to store more body fat in our lower bodies. If your quads are weak, they need to get stronger to keep up with the load you want to use for your glutes. So it's like just rest easy, knowing that they're not gonna blow up like Ronnie Coleman. We're not built like that. You know, like if you're gonna do a squat, you're gonna do a lunge or a Bulgarian, there's so much potential for glute growth and strength. People get so obsessed with the butt that they forget about how important it is to have strong glutes and strong quads so that when we're 60, 70, 80 years old, we can still walk around the block. We can still get up out of our chair. Like we need strong glutes and legs in order for that to happen.
Yeah, we've been going for over an hour now. I have two more things that
let's
I want you. All right. Speaking of, I forgot exactly what you said, but it made me think of grip strength. People
RDLs and straps.
Straps. Yeah, people don't want to use straps because they say it doesn't work on their grip, but at some point, you're gonna have to use the straps or something, some type of assistance to help you load up your legs because your legs are always gonna overpower or be stronger than your upper body. Can you talk about like why there's nothing wrong with using assistance for grip strength?
Yeah, well, again, it's what is the primary objective of the exercise? And if you're not using straps on like every other movement that you ever do, you're constantly carrying dumbbells, you're constantly holding dumbbells, you're constantly holding the lat pull down as you do your pull downs or whatever. You're working your grip a ton progressively if you're lifting progressively heavier weights over time for everything. And if you're working on pull ups, and you're able to even just hold yourself on a bar, that's meaningfully strengthening the muscles in your forearms, your hands, all those grip muscles that people are so obsessed with. So if you need straps, which you should at some point have glutes, hamstrings, legs that are stronger than your ability to grip. If you got to break out the straps so that you can appropriately train your lower body, please do so. Like, do not use this whole excuse. Oh, but if you use straps, it's cheating. No, it's not. If you don't use straps and you're only able to load your lower body or your back, for example, 70% of the way, then you're just sandbagging your workout.
Right.
I
My
think people.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say some people get carried away and they use them for everything. Like you'll see a lot of like bodybuilding competitors. They're doing like their first set of lat pull downs. They're strapping that shit in. Never in all of my days have I tried to strap into a lat pull down. Now, really, really strong muscular dudes, maybe. I can't relate to that. I can do 12 pull-ups. Never in my life have I felt my grip as the limiting factor. I cannot pull myself up because my back muscles are clocked out, right? But when I go to do an RDL, when I go to do lunges with dumbbells, if I'm going to do a single arm dumbbell row with a 60-pound weight, I need my straps because I want either the glutes, the hamstrings, whatever, or the back muscles. I want that to fail. I don't want to fail because I'm dropping the dumbbell on the ground.
I agree. I was gonna say that my forearm muscles be cramping after I do RDLs with dumbbells, and I just can't hold a heavier weight than what I'm at now. So the straps are needed.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And the next thing I wanted to ask, you touched on it a little bit regarding don't tell somebody that their quads are fat and weak. Can we please talk about I think you talked about this on your story, but about how coaches and trainers talk to their clients?
Oh, good Lord. Absolutely. Do a whole podcast on this itself. But shaming people doesn't work long term. It's a horrible business model. Pain points are such a scammy marketing tactic, and it might work to get emotionally unstable and insecure people in the door, but it doesn't work long term. You can get that person to come to you by like triggering their pain point. But what happens when that person decides that they actually want to feel better about themselves? They're not going to want to work with you anymore. And not to mention, if you get this person to commit to working out by motivating them, by saying they're fat, your grandma is in better shape than them, you are forcing this person to draw a negative correlation to working out. So if this person ever decides that they want to love themselves, they're not going to want to work out because they have a toxic relationship with it thanks to your dumbass. So it's like if we can use at least neutral, if we can at least be neutral, if not positive and encouraging, we can actually help people to start engaging in the better behaviors so that they can, whether they're overweight and they need to lose weight or they are, whatever, they're just unhealthy in general, if they want to get stronger. As a trainer, a coach, a fitness professional in any way, shape, or form, we are supposed to be helping people. So if we at least can help them to be neutral, and if not positive, we can help them to draw positive correlations to these behaviors so they're more likely to keep them long term.
Totally agree. Totally agree. So with that, I think we right now are the longest podcast, which is cool. We're definitely going to have you back on so we can discuss things as far as program design and dive deeper into nutrition. But before we close out, Liz, once again, we want to thank you for having you come onto the podcast. For those out there in the fitness world that want to learn more about you, get more understanding of who you are and what you provide, where can everybody find you?
So you can find me on Instagram at Liz Brody Fitness. That is my online office. That is LizBrody Fitness, FITNESS. I have a little broadcast channel on there. You can also join that. I post like some extra reels, and sometimes I'll take form submissions. So if you want to submit videos, and I'll do like a little green screen form review for you. And on my page and on my stories, I'm always trying to post form demos and just things that will help and to teach people.
Awesome.
Tell them where to find your nutrition ebook, because that's a big help as well.
Yep. What's that?
Oh, yeah. So my website is lizbrodyfitness.com. So again, just like my Instagram handle, same thing, lizbrodyfitness.com. In the shop portion, you can either book consults, you can download my nutrition ebook, which is 30 pages, and it's for all levels of understanding. Whether you do not know what a macronutrient is, or you're pretty well versed in nutrition and you kind of want to refine your nutrition and make it as best as it can be for your goals, you can download that. And like I said, on my shop, you can see everything from the consults to the ebook to coaching and all that good stuff.
Awesome. We will definitely put that into the notes section of the podcast so you guys can go right in there and grab that information. But other than that, thank you, Liz, once again. And this is the No BS Fitness Prescription Podcast. And we will see you guys soon.
Peace.